Howdy folks, welcome to module 19 of the CompTIA A course. So this is the second last module in this course, which I'm sure you guys are already aware of, and then we're going to do a bunch of practice questions. So this module is called Using Support Tools. Obviously that doesn't really tell us what the module is about until we actually dive into it. So speaking of which, here is the list of the main sections we'll be covering in this module. The first one is Use Remote Access Technologies. The second section will be Implement Backup and Recovery. The third and the last section we'll be diving into in this module is Data Handling Best Practices. So there's three main sections we'll be covering. Now I'm sure the majority of you guys know this already, but in case you're new on the channel or in case you don't know, in the video description down below, you can find a more accurate list of the topics covered in this module, and I've added nice little timestamps there for your convenience. So yeah, feel free to go and check it out. Now, I did mention it just a moment ago, and I'll mention it again. Once we've covered the full course, which consists of 20 modules, I'm going to go and make a video or so that's going to have practice questions for you guys, and then the idea of that video is for me to go through the practice questions, go through the possible answers, and I'll basically have a little bit of a chat, a discussion as to what is the answer, what is not the answer, why is it the answer, why is it not the answer, that kinds of stuff. So it's ideally supposed to help you guys prepare for the exam. And I've also said this part before, and I'll say it again, that's not going to be the actual questions from the exam. That's not allowed by the vendor, so I can't do that. But they will cover the same objectives. They will measure you on the same skills. So yeah. Guys, considering what I've been doing here, I would appreciate if you give this video a like. I really do appreciate that. It does help me and the channel out as well. Then obviously YouTube's going to go and push this out to more folks that actually needs it, this material. And if you'd like to know when module 20, the last one, comes out, or those practice questions, or quite frankly anything else, maybe consider subscribing, otherwise you might miss it. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's go and start that first main section, which is Use Remote Access Technologies. First thing we're going to be talking about in this section, folks, is remote desktop tools. So that can actually be a lot of tools, but coming at this from a Microsoft perspective, I know this is a CompTIA course, you'll notice there's not that many that's actually built into the operating system. So most of the time, we're going to end up using something other than the Microsoft tools. I believe Microsoft refers to these as third-party tools. Anyway, so first of all, security considerations. So if you look at the picture there on the right, remote desktop connection. I mean, I might as well add that here as a second point as well. There we go, remote desktop protocol. That, for those of you that don't know, is something that is built into the Windows operating system. You can find it both on the client editions of Windows as well as the server editions. Now, obviously, there's T's and C's to that. This is not really a Windows course. I'm not going to go into too much detail with regards to that. But it basically comes down to you need to have the correct edition of Windows. So if there's, like, for example, 7 editions of Windows 7, you will find that only the last 3 most expensive editions of Windows will actually have that. The lower tier ones, Home, Basic, all those kinds of editions, they don't come with that, because why would you need that? Anyway, so with regards to security considerations, you'll notice the majority of these kinds of tools are actually turned off by default, and they are blocked by default. Now, why is that? Because the average Joe is not necessarily in IT like you guys. So they don't know about these tools, and even if they do, they don't know how to go and turn them off or on, to go block them, to go and allow them. Now, going on the assumption that the average Joe does not actually know about these tools, that makes them vulnerable. Someone like us, someone that's not necessarily a good guy, can take advantage of that. And we can go and try and remote connect to one of these people's machines, and we can go and get up to some sort of shenanigans, which is not so nice. So what a lot of these people, like Microsoft, has done now is they've turned these things off by default, and they've locked them or blocked them in the firewall by default. This is for people's own good, to basically protect them. They don't know this is happening in the background, but it basically go and protect them. So should someone need one of these tools one day, that will be us now, you would need to go and turn it on and allow it in the firewall usually. So keeping it to remote desktop for now. If you are remote desktoping from your machine, There's nothing you need to go and turn on or allow. You just open remote desktop. You type in the remote destination's IP address, its name. Before anyone asks me how do you access remote desktop, guys, you just go to search, for example. I mean, you can literally go open Cortana at the bottom left of your computer. Go to search, type in remote desktop, voila, it's going to pop up. I mean, if you want to go and open this the fancy way, I suppose you can go into Task Manager. You can go and say New Task, and then you go type in mstsc.exe. I'm going to say it again, mstsc.exe. So if you type that in, you'll find it's going to also open remote desktop. So that's the fancy techie way of going and opening it. Anyway, so if you're remote desktoping from your machine, nothing needs to be done. You just open it up. You type in the destination machine's IP address, its name, or website, whatever you want to go and connect to, and it might ask you for a username and a password, and there you go, on your way. Now, if you are the machine that is being connected to, now you need to go and configure a couple of things. So on the machine that's being connected to, you need to go and turn it on. You're going to go and do that in your system properties, and you need to go and allow it in the firewall. Once you've done that, you will be able to remote connect to that machine. A couple of things worth mentioning here. I know this is not really what this module is about, but considering we've got time, I might as well mention this to you guys because I know some of you guys are going to be using this in the field as well. So these videos are not just to prepare you for the exam, it's also to help you guys in the field once you guys go into the field. By default, you don't need to be on the same domain to use remote desktop, but you do need to be in the same network, generally in the same building. So assuming you're in the same building and you're on the same network, you'll be able to connect to another machine with remote desktop, even if you're not on the same domain. Now by default, you can also do just one machine to one other machine. So there is ways around that. So if you're connecting to a server, yes, then you can potentially have more than one machine connect to that machine, but at least not by default. By default, it's one. But if you want to have more than one, it is possible, but then you're going to start looking at licensing. We call those CALs, CALs, Client Access Licenses. You need a license for each and every person that remote connects to that machine at that point in time. So the more licenses, the more people that can connect to it at a given time. So yeah, we can keep talking about this, but this is not what this course is about, or this module at least. Other things we can mention regarding remote desktop tools is virtual network computing, VNC. Now I want to make it clear, this is the only one actually mentioned in the A+ course, but I am going to add 2 extra ones here for you guys, which is not in the course. So you don't have to worry about these 2 being asked in the exam because they're not in the course. I'm adding them for you guys as an extra. The first one being TeamViewer, and the second one here being AnyDesk. So VNC, that one is part of the official course. It is mentioned in the official course, and it might possibly be asked in the official exams. TeamViewer, AnyDesk, they do the exact same thing. These are just other tools out there, which is just as well known. They're just as good, but they're not asked in the official exam because they're not in the official course. So what does VNC, TeamViewer, and AnyDesk actually do? First thing I want to mention about those 3 tools, guys, is they're not installed on Windows by default. You will have to go and download these tools. Sometimes there's licensing involved as well. The machine that you're connecting from, you need to go and install this on. And the machine that you're connecting to, you need to go and install this on. That applies to all 3 of those tools there, VNC, TeamViewer, and AnyDesk. You need to install it on the one you're connecting from and the one you're connecting to. So, now what's going to happen is on the machine that you're connecting to, the person that's on that machine is probably the one that's going to need some sort of technical assistance from someone like yourself. They will open the program, whichever one of these 3, and it'll normally give them an ID for their machine. It's something like a 9-digit number. It's a unique number. It doesn't change. It'll always stay the same for that machine. So that, let's say, 9-digit number, you need to give that to the technician that's going to assist you remotely. So you can give it to them over the phone. You can give it to them in an email, a WhatsApp. It's your choice how you want to do it. The point is, you give that ID to the technician. They open the program on their side as well. They type in the ID of the machine they're about to connect to, which is now yours. And then it's going to ask that technician for a password. Now, every time you open this application, whichever one, it gives you a password, but it's a temporary password. That's to prevent people from connecting to your machine when you are not there and when you're not aware of it. So you can open the application. It's going to give you a temporary password. You give the temporary password to the person that needs to assist you, which is the technician. That's going to be you guys probably. They type in a temporary password and they will gain remote access to the machine. Now, as soon as this whole shebaggle is done and everybody closes the program, the next time the machine gets started or the application gets started again, you're going to see it's going to be a new temporary password. So this prevents unauthorized access to the person's machine. At least that's the idea behind it. Now, should you connect to a person's machine using one of these free machines, or one of these free applications, should I say, you will be able to see what the user sees. It's not like remote desktop where it kicks the person off and they're on the logon screen and it'll say something along the lines of you've logged in from somewhere else. Should they log back in, it kicks you off. Should you log back in, it kicks them off. Only one person can actually see the screen and only one person can actually control the computer. Unless you're talking about that server environment I spoke about earlier. Now, these free applications at the bottom, VNC, TeamViewer, and AnyDesk, you and the user can both see the same screen at the same time, and you can both control the same machine at the same time. So you can both move the mouse, you can both interact with the keyboard. One person sitting in front of the computer physically, and the other one is connecting remotely, and that would probably be you. So if the user is currently on the machine active, they can show you what the problem is. You can tell them, sir, ma'am, show me the problem that you are experiencing, because you can see it remotely like a video feed. As soon as they're done, you tell them, okay, stop moving the mouse now. Let me take over. And then from there, you can start fixing the machine. And while you're doing it, the user can actually see what you're doing. Pretty cool, right? Right, folks, so still on the topic of remote connectivity, but slightly different name or technology. So here we've got something called remote assistance. Microsoft Remote Assistance. This is in no way something new. A lot of people don't even know about it. They're like, wow, is this something new? No, guys, it's not something new. It's been around on Microsoft since the beginning of time, quite frankly. It's just people don't really use it. I mean, the funny thing is not even Microsoft themselves go and use this, which is hilarious. It's not a bad tool though. So if you go into a client operating system, and let's say you go at the bottom left to Cortana, and you go type in remote assistance, you're going to find a wizard's going to actually start. And when you go for this wizard, it's going to allow you to create what they call an invite. So it allows users to send an invite. Now, what the heck is this invite? Why do we create it? What do we do with it? Well, guys, the invite allows technicians to provide remote assistance. So the idea is you go for the wizard, you create a little invite. It's a very, very small, tiny little file. And you're supposed to send that invite file to the person that needs to give you assistance. A technician. And that technician is probably going to be you guys. How you give it to that technician, that's up to you. I'll leave your imagination to, run wild with that one. But it generally comes down to giving it to them on a flash drive, mailing it to them, that kinds of stuff. Once the technician receives the invite, they click on it. It establishes a session from the technician's machine to the user's machine. And from there, it's very much the same as those other free tools we just spoke of. AnyDesk, TeamViewer, VNC, where you and the user can both see the same screen at the same time. You can both control the same machine at the same time. So the difference here is remote assistance, you need to create an invite. With the other free tools that I've just mentioned, you need to go and read the technician your ID and give them a temporary password. Other than that, it's pretty much the same can of worms, guys. Alright, moving on. Other remote access tools. Yes, there is more, guys. There's always more. I mean, you know how IT is. It is vast. First thing up, screen sharing software. I think we pretty much covered that topic, didn't we? So this will be third-party remote desktop tools designed to work over the internet. What does that sound like to you guys when I say third-party remote desktop tools? So if I just said remote desktop tools, that will probably be the tools that's built into Windows, like remote desktop and the remote assistance. But if I say third-party remote desktop tools, I'm referring to VNC. Now, yes, technically TeamViewer and AnyDesk is also those tools, but since they're not officially part of the course, I'm probably not going to go and mention them. I'm only going to mention what's officially part of the course, in quotes, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and that will be VNC. So if you're going to get asked about any of that in the exam, they will only ask you about VNC, since that's the only one that's officially part of the A+ course. We also have video conferencing software. Now, I think everybody these days knows what video conferencing software is, and that's not just because we had the pandemic, COVID-19. We were heading in that direction anyway. When you folks will see these days, half of people are no longer working from the office, they're working from home. And it's because we can. We are in the 21st century. That is where technology is now. Everything is becoming remote. Everything is becoming virtual. Everything is moving into the cloud. So it should come as no surprise that there is so many video conferencing software out there that essentially allows you, your staff, your users to communicate with one another, to collaborate with one another. Most of these softwares include some sort of basic screen share client and that kinds of stuff. That's probably all I need to say, with regards to A+, but I can add on to that. If you want a couple of examples, I think very, very well-known softwares like this will probably be Microsoft Teams. And no, I'm not promoting Microsoft. That is just one of the most widely used ones. It'll probably be other things like Zoom. That's probably another good one. And it used to be software like Skype for Business, but that's obviously being replaced by Microsoft Teams. And before Skype for Business, we used to use Microsoft Link and your normal Skype, and there's quite a few other tools you can obviously go and use as well. Then we've got file transfer software. So if I need to transfer software from one device to another device, I'm saying device because it's not necessarily computers, how would one go about doing that? Now, I mean, if I left it up to your imagination, you'll probably be able to give me a very long list of how to do that because there's probably like an insane amount of ways to do that. But coming at this from the official CompTIA perspective, CompTIA says you can go and use easy sharing via Bluetooth. I mean, I suppose we can't disagree with that. Bluetooth is one way. But when last have you seen someone share something via Bluetooth? I'm not saying it can't be done. I mean, it can definitely be done, but nobody does Bluetooth anymore. The only thing we use Bluetooth for these days is to connect to, sound systems, to connect to our vehicles, headless, headsets, that kinds of stuff. Nobody goes and connects one device to another device to go and transfer files. I mean, nobody does that. It's just, no. It's the old way of doing things. But anyway, it's in the course, so let it not be said that I did not say it. Then CompTIA also says Apple's AirDrop, Windows nearby sharing, and then of course Android's nearby share. Those are other things you guys can go and look at. I'm not a big fan of any of those, but nonetheless, it's part of the course, so yeah, there you guys go. And then guys, last thing for this specific list, virtual private network. Good old-fashioned VPN. I suppose it's pointless for me to ask you what VPN stands for, since I've kind of given away the answer now there, haven't I? Virtual private network. We have kind of covered this in another module, I believe, but in case you guys did not see that, in case you don't know what a VPN is, or in case you don't remember, a VPN is a form of remote connectivity. It was originally designed to allow a user to remote connect to the office via a secure tunnel. So, normally if you go and connect to the office, that is going to put you at risk. It's going to put your data at risk, because anyone in the middle can go and intercept that communication, and that's going to pose a problem. So now, with this thing originally being designed for people to work from home, you can securely connect over the internet, and you can imagine yourself being in like a little encrypted tunnel. And now if anyone and his uncle wants to try and intercept that communication, it's going to be rendered useless. They're going to see all kinds of ciphertext. They won't be able to do that. Now, so a couple of notes regarding VPN, which some of you guys might not know. If you VPN to a location like the office, it's as if you are at the office. Yep. So physically, yes, you are sitting at home, you can see your physical home environment, you can see your computer screen, but digitally speaking, logically speaking, it's as if you are at the office. Anything you could normally do while you're at the office, you can do that now. So if there's certain servers and certain resources you could access, you can do that now. But this is essentially also a double-edged sword. So if there's any policies or permissions or something in that environment, like your office, that says you're not allowed to go and do certain things, that would also apply to you now. So to give you an example, if you are at the office, you might notice that you could not go onto Facebook or YouTube because they've got policies for that. At least most companies do. Now, when you're at home on your own internet, obviously you can do what you want. I mean, it's your internet. But if you go and VPN to the office, remember, it is as if you are at the office. So now, as soon as you open a browser of your choice and you go to one of those websites, you're going to notice it's not going to work. Now, folks, with regards to setting up a VPN connection, there is many ways you can go about doing it. Alternatively, you can just go and buy yourself one online. One of the ones I prefer to go and use, and I can definitely recommend them, is NordVPN. And before you ask, yes, I am promoting them. I actually am, in fact, promoting them. Should you want to go and use them, there is a link in the video description down below. And full disclosure, should you click on the link down below, I do get a portion of the proceeds. So yeah, please use my link should you be interested. Now, with regards to a VPN, like I said, what is a VPN? It's a virtual private network. You can think of it as teleporting yourself digitally, which I'll mention in a moment again. It was originally designed to allow people to connect remotely from home to a place like the office, but it's absolutely not the only thing we use it for these days. You'll find a lot of folks go and use a VPN like NordVPN to access resources online, like TV streaming services and stuff that might not be available in the country. So why should we use something like a VPN connection? Well, many reasons, guys. The biggest one and the most important one here is probably the security aspect. If you go and connect from some place like home to the office, there's always a chance that some weasel and his uncle might be sitting in the middle. They can intercept your communication, they can hijack your communication, and if you're doing something very important over that connection, maybe logging into a server of sorts, that is not good. If you are, for example, doing your banking online, or you're logging into something very important online, ideally you don't want someone to be able to see your username and password. And let me tell you, it is very possible for someone to intercept that communication, especially if you're using a public internet connection. So the next time you go and sit in an internet cafe, or the next time you go and sit in a coffee shop, or you go and use the free Wi-Fi at the airport, think again. Anyone and everybody that's on that internet connection potentially has access to your information, and they could potentially see what you're doing. So to avoid that from happening, I'm not saying you should not use that public internet connection, although you want to try and avoid that too. I'm saying use a VPN connection, because when that connection is secure, it is encrypted, and if anybody tries to intercept the communication, no, they're not going to be able to see anything. So yeah, that's one of the main benefits you can go and use it for. It's not the only thing, so we'll get to that in a moment. So when can you actually go and use something like NordVPN? Guys, you're just going to go and you're going to start the client. And I would actually recommend running it permanently. Normally we want to try and avoid running a VPN because generally they tend to make your internet connection a bit slower. But with NordVPN, I can confirm it actually is one of the fastest VPN connections out there. I think it actually is the fastest VPN connection. You can go check it out on their website for yourself. They will go and compare themselves to a lot of well-known other VPN providers out there. And you'll find that NordVPN is actually the fastest out of the whole lot. So whether you're downloading, whether you're browsing, whether you're streaming, you're not going to have any lag. It's going to be aces. It is an encrypted remote connection. I think we've said that quite a few times. It is like digitally teleporting yourself somewhere you're not. Now this becomes very beneficial in many ways. Like I've said, it's not just for work purposes. I mean, this gives you access to resources in other places, like other countries where you would previously be blocked. So if you are on YouTube and you want to go and watch a video, but it's not allowed in your country, well, as soon as you go into NordVPN, you just choose a country where it is actually allowed. And as soon as you've done that, it is as if you are teleporting. So you can see here's quite a decent map. I mean, look at some of those dots. And guys, believe it or not, those dots are actually not all the NordVPN services. There's actually quite a few that's not even shown on this map. But the idea is you choose a country. You'll find a lot of countries actually has multiple NordVPN servers you can go and teleport to. You choose one, you click on it. It's as if you're teleporting to that location, and voila, all resources like YouTube videos. This actually works great with streaming platforms like Netflix, Disney Plus, all of those ones. All of these streaming resources are now available. Maybe there's a TV show on your streaming platform, but it does not show in your country. It only shows in other countries. Well, just teleport to that country. Voila, there you go. You can see it. So people and malicious software can't track you online if you go and use this. And people and malicious software can't see what you're doing. It's an encrypted connection. So guys, there is my 2 cents. I know I rambled a little bit there. And yes, like I said before, I do get a portion of the proceeds should you click on the link down below. Go check them out or don't. It's your choice, but I definitely recommend these guys. So that brings us to the end of the first main section, boys and girls. And now we can move on to the second main section, which is implement backup and recovery. Right, first topic up in the second section, backup operations. I mean, that should come as no surprise since the whole section is called backup something something. So, criticality of data backup and recovery options. What do we backup? Guys, I cannot emphasize on how important it is that you go and backup. You backup, and then you do another backup, and then you do another backup just because you can. You can never have too many backups, and you can never store them for too long. The more backups you have, and the longer you store them, the better. Daily backups, weekly backups, monthly backups, and my God, offsite backups. You want to get as many of them as you can. It sounds easy when I say it like that, but it's not. It's actually very expensive and it's a lot of work. I think the biggest issue here is the cost factor for most companies. So, what do we back up? I would say everything. You want to back up everything. How do we store these backups? That's up to you. You'll find the majority of companies will go and store their daily, weekly, and monthly backups generally on a server somewhere in the company. But you do also get what we call off-site backups. These are full backups which are not plugged in into anything like the servers or the network or anything in that regard. The idea here is if the poop hits the fan here inevitably one day, you don't want to have all your backups in one basket. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, as the saying goes. So there's quite a few malicious things happening out there, one of which is ransomware. I've had many cases of ransomware, some of my clients, where they did actually, in fact, do backups. They had daily, weekly, and monthly backups, but they did not have offsite backups. Now, some of these ransomware softwares, they lie dormant on a system because they know you do these daily, weekly, and monthly backups. And then eventually, after a month or so, whammo, ransomware activates, it encrypts everything, including all your backups. And now, unless you or this client had some offsite backups which were not plugged in, you can kiss everything goodbye. So you want to make sure you've got offsite backups. It's a full backup. You go and you'll find that normally if you are the person that makes the backup, I used to be that person, I would give it to them. They would go and store it someplace safe in an undisclosed location. Even I don't know where it is. So normally you would also not know where this is. You give it to them. Ideally, it needs to be in a different location, like physically different location, the other side of town. Maybe it needs to be in a different state, different province, different country. It just needs to be very far away. So if there's some sort of disaster, then at least you can go and use that. Now, what I also did, and this is not actually part of the course, this is just something extra I'm adding for you guys, just to show you how we actually do this in real life in some companies. I would make two offsite backups at the same time. I would write the date and the timestamp on these two. They're identical clones of one another, if you will. The one offsite backup, the one clone, legit gets sent offsite to an undisclosed location. The second one actually, in fact, gets kept inside the building. Now, yes, it's not technically off-site if it's still on-site, but it's not plugged in. That's the important part here. So the one in the building would normally be locked in a safe somewhere or in a metal cabinet somewhere. It'll be locked up. Now, why do we do it like that? Or why did I do it like that? Because you get two kinds of disasters. You get a digital one, so if it's something like a ransomware attack or something in that regard, you ideally want to recover as quickly as possible. Time quite literally is money in most cases here. So there's companies out there where I've worked with them where they lose like 1 million a minute. So the longer you're offline and the longer you take to recover, the more money this client's going to lose or your company's going to lose and the more they're going to be on your case. So you want to get them back up and running as quickly as possible. And to do that, you need to have a backup as close as possible. Now, in the event of a physical disaster, let's say there was a riot, the building burned down, there was a flood, there was a mudslide, there was massive theft, there was an earthquake, whatever the case might be. In the event of a physical disaster, then yes, in those extreme cases, you would actually resort to the actual off-site backup. But unless it's some sort of physical crazy disaster, you're probably going to resort to the actual off-site backup, which is in fact in the building. You can just go and grab that puppy, you're going to start plugging it in, and you're going to start recovering as quickly as possible. That's ideally what you want to go and do. So on that note, testing and validating recovery procedures. So it's one thing to have all these backups, even your offsite backups, but they mean nothing if you don't actually go and test them. I've had many clients where they had the world's best backups, but they never actually tested these backups. And God forbid if something eventually happens one day, oops, sorry boys, we never actually tested these backups, and it turns out they don't actually work. So what you want to do here, and it's probably not officially mentioned in the A+ course, you want to simulate a failure of sorts. I don't recommend doing this in the middle of working hours. I would suggest you do this like after hours, preferably on a Friday, so that you've got the weekend to recover in case you make a oopsie. So go and, let's say, turn off your server. Let's say this is a server backup. Turn off the server. You don't have to go and crash it. Just turn it off. And see if you can recover onto another blank server. So check if your backups actually work. And check how long they take to basically complete. So this is going to allow you to test two things. It's going to allow you to test whether the backups are actually working. So you can go and check afterwards if everything is in a running order. And it's also going to allow you to basically establish a time frame as to how long it took to do that. Now, why do we want a time frame? Because I can guarantee you, once upon a time or one day, when this stuff really does kick the bucket, these users and these customers and clients are going to be harassing you nonstop. They're going to want to know, how much longer, how long is this going to take? And at least if you've done this once or twice before, you can give them a fairly accurate reading as to how long you expect the ETA to be. So yeah, do that. Now, as for tools, Windows tools for personal data backup, yeah, that's typical Microsoft. So you can go use file history. It's not the worst, it's not the best, but it is built into Windows, so feel free to go make use of that. Alternatively, you can also go make use of Windows Backup and Restore Center. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't actually use that much. I just normally use file history here and there. I'll use System Restore here and there, although System Restore doesn't actually back up data, just backs up the system settings. File history is more for the actual files themselves. And there is plenty of third-party softwares out there that you can go and use for backupping. And you'll find that 99% of the time, most companies actually use some sort of third-party backupping software. I did have a couple of weird clients out there where I would get to the client and the client would say, please do my backups. Daily, weekly, monthly, and offsite. I'm like, okay, cool. Sounds easy enough. And then they tell me, but we do not want you installing any software on our servers. So I'm like, okay, so you want me to do backups, but I'm not allowed to install anything. So that just sounds crazy. Are you expecting me to sit there the whole day, every day, and just copy paste? Because that's just nuts. I've got other clients, and this is going to take too long. And guess what? I actually ended up doing that. I just went into Notepad. I went and wrote copy paste. It's basically command prompt commands that I went and wrote into Notepad. Saved it as a batch file, and I hooked it up to Task Scheduler, and voila, copy paste ended up happening automatically every day, daily, weekly, and monthly. I added a couple of parameters because, obviously if you go and copy something as a human, it's bound to run into some sort of error at some point. It's going to say this file already exists, or the name is too long, or there's no folder, or this or that. And normally as a human, you can go and say skip, abort, retry, cancel, that kinds of stuff. Now, what if you're not there? So that's where the parameters comes into play. So whenever these errors or events happen, it'll automatically know what to go and answer. And believe it or not, this is literally like a one-line command in command prompt, which I just added to Notepad, saved as a batch file, and voila. Now, it's not actually part of the course, but if any one of you guys are curious how I did that, or if you would like to know what the command was, you're more than welcome to ask me in the comments down below. I will give it to you, and you're welcome to go and use it as your own in your company environment if it'll make your life easier. It's not an exam. This is just to help you guys at a work environment. Alternatively, you can ask me on Discord. The Discord server link is in the video description down below. So as soon as you open the video description, it'll literally be like way at the bottom of the video description. Just go and check it out there. Also remember to go and check out that NordVPN link that I gave earlier. And you'll find us all the video timestamps and all that stuff is down below as well. Alright, so let's talk about backup methods. The frequency and retention. I think I accidentally covered this one already just a moment ago. So frequency is how often do you do this? How many kinds of backups do you do? My recommendation, as I've said before, and I'm saying it again because it's very flippin' important, the more backups you do and the more frequently you do it, the better. The longer you keep them, the better. You want to do daily, weekly, monthly, and preferably offsite. Now, for me to say this to you guys in this course is one thing, but you'll realize very quickly that when you actually go into the field, it's not as easy. Not because it's, rocket science or anything. It's not that. It's more the budget doesn't allow it. Your managers don't allow it. Your client doesn't want to go for it. It's politics, as they would say. It's other restrictions that's going to make your life difficult. But if it's within your power, and if your company, your client's company, whoever allows it, my guys, I would definitely recommend you go and do this as often as you possibly can. Offsite backups, unfortunately, is going to be quite expensive, and even the on-site ones. I mean, the more backups you do, the more space you're going to require. The more space you require, the more hard drives you're going to need. The more hard drives you need, the more money you're going to need. And this is not normal desktop hard drives, guys. These are normal server drives. Very expensive, those drives. As for retention, that's up to you. You're going to have to go and decide, maybe have a discussion with your client or your bosses, if it's your own company, and you go make an informed decision as to how long you would like to keep your backups. Do you want to go, keep backups for the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Now, best case scenario, you want to keep this forever, but obviously we know that's not possible because it's going to cost you an insane amount of money. But, I would say just as long as possible. That's all I'm going to say here. Now, backup chains. What the flippin' heck is that? So this is full with incremental or differential. So I've got a bit of a table here, which is probably going to clarify that a little bit better. So you get full, you get incremental, and you get differential. A full backup, and I think the name kind of explains itself, is when you back up everything. So if you look at something like a server or a computer, the very first backup will be a full backup, and I can guarantee you it's going to take forever because you're doing a full backup and you're doing it for the first time. Now, the full backup is something we normally don't do more than once per se. You only do it the first time, and generally you only do it once. Once you've done the full backup, which means you've got everything backed up now, from that point forward, we normally do an incremental or a differential backup. So you can see that if we look at incremental at the bottom of my table, it says new files and files modified since last backup. So it's not going to go and back up everything because we already have everything backed up. It's just going to go and check, okay, boys, what is new and what files have been changed since the last backup. And it's going to only back up the new files and the files that have altered. Therefore, you've actually technically got a full backup again. A differential backup is new files once again. Files has been modified since the last full backup job. But you'll see they're pretty much the same thing, to be honest with you guys. Alright, and then the last topic I'm going to talk to you guys about in this backupping section is backup testing and recovery. So we did kind of cover this if you think about it. So first of all, test restore, alternate location. So like I said before, and I'm saying it again, you need to make sure you test your backups. You can have the world's best backups and you can go back 20 years in time, but they don't do any squat if you don't actually go and test them. So go and simulate a failure of some sort, or just go and grab yourself a blank location, an alternative location, or a blank server. Try and actually restore these backups, whatever kind of backups we're talking about, and see if they actually work. While you're at it, also go get yourself a time frame as to how long that took. So that if and when this really does happen one day, you can at least give the customer, the clients, or the user a time frame as to how long you expect this to take. Then we need to go and talk about verification. Something I didn't actually mention earlier, but here we go. Verification. So once you have yourself a couple of backups, and hopefully you've got a lot of backups, you want to make sure that these backups don't get tampered with. And you also want to make sure that they have not been tampered with should you want to go and restore one day. So with that in mind, data validation via hashing. So you're going to go and hash these backups, and media integrity. So now one day, if you or one of your colleagues needs to go and restore a backup, you're going to first go and make sure that the backup that you're about to go and restore is in fact legit. Now, why am I saying that? Because believe it or not, you get some weirdos out there, and these guys will go and tamper with backups. They will go and inject something that's not supposed to be there, but this could even potentially be ransomware. And when they do that, and you go and restore that backup, you are in fact making matters worse. You are restoring a backup that's now got ransomware. You can actually be the downfall here, is what I'm saying. So yeah, and then also guys, check configuration. So never mind making sure this backup has not been tampered with and that it's legit and all that. You also want to go and just check general configuration. So just make sure this backup is going to restore everything that needs to be restored, and that it's going to include all the locations that needs to be included. And then the last point here, which is probably not really worth mentioning at this point anymore, is frequent testing. So you don't want to just test once, you want to test frequently, at least once a week or at least once a month. Once a week might be too excessive because it is a lot of work, guys, unless you've got time on your hands. So I would say test it at least once a month. Once a month, test the backups, make sure they're working. If they are, great. So, and that, boys, brings us to the end of the second main section of this module. Moving on to the third one, data handling best practices. All right, starting things off with regulated data classification. So, what do we actually deem as regulated data types? What kind of information should we regulate? What kind of information do we need to be careful with when we work with it? And, this applies to when we say storing it, working with it, backing it up, just general protecting of certain information. So this will be things like personally identifiable information. We call this PII for short. So this is, people's identification numbers, social security numbers, depending on which country you're in. They might refer to this as an ID number. Some countries call this a social security number. I suppose it varies from country to country. It can be personal government issued information. It can be healthcare data. So any medical records, anything like that, which is normally between you and your medical provider, that is confidential. It can be something like credit card transactions, and the list, of course, goes on. Any personal private information, this is regulated data types. Now, you'll find the majority of countries out there has some sort of privacy laws these days. They've got a name for it. I can't give you the name because it's not called the same thing in all countries, but generally it comes down to a privacy law in your country, and it normally protects people's personal information. You can't just go and post random information randomly. You cannot just go and use information randomly. So these days, you'll find that the majority of these privacy laws and stuff, they want to know what information of people do you have? Why do you have it? What do you plan on doing with it? How do you plan on storing it? How do you plan on securing it and backing it up? And once you're no longer going to use it or need it, how do you plan on destroying, that information? It's a huge thorn in my side of my country, but yeah, nonetheless, that's what it comes down to. So data handling best practices, that's another thing we need to mention. So if you do end up working with people's private information, it's always a good idea, and I think this is common sense, to keep it private. Do not show information to other people that do not need to see it. You'll find this applies in all companies. So even if this is a co-worker and he or she works in the same company as you, if you are working with private information of people and that co-worker of yours is not authorized to see that information, you should not show it to them. Not necessarily because, it's going to harm the company financially per se, but it is still private information. I mean, this kind of applies to if you look at something like a lawyer or a doctor, that is confidential. So your doctor will not discuss your private medical information of anyone else unless they need to know. So maybe he or she will discuss with another doctor if that other doctor is going to be taking over. Same of lawyers. Your lawyer will not discuss anything that you've discussed with them unless you are transferring to another lawyer. Then they'll obviously go and transfer the information. But other than that, it is private. And you need to do the same for your clients and your users. Data retention requirements. And this is a predicament. So depending on the industry that your client or your client's company is in, there is certain requirements for certain types of information. If you look at like medical institutions, once again, banks, law firms, etc., etc., some of these institutions have to keep information backed up, retained, stored for an X amount of time. This can be anything from 5 years all the way to 20 or 30 years. So legally, by law, at least your country's local law, they have to keep that information for an X amount of time. And once that time has lapsed, then and only then can they go and get rid of the information, destroy it in some sort of manner, of course. So yeah, I can't tell you what the time frame is because it obviously varies from country to country. It varies from region to region. It varies from industry to industry. But that's basically what it comes down to. So depending on what industry you're in, what country you're in, and obviously your client's unique requirements, you want to go and sit down with this client and discuss retention of them and how you plan on achieving that goal. So you'll find that if you go look at something like Microsoft 365, not the topic here at all, they've got quite a few amazing retention policies you can go and make use of. Sounds like I'm promoting them. No, I'm not. The only thing I was promoting in this module was, of course, the NordVPN earlier. So yeah, we were talking about VPN, so I figured, you know what, I might as well mention it to you guys. So yeah, go check those guys out. Anywho, moving on. Prohibited content and licensing issues. Now, as technicians slash engineers, guys, there's going to be times in your career where you're going to be running into things which I would say is prohibited. It's things that's not allowed by your company or your client's company. So let's say you are on the server or you go to a user's machine, you're troubleshooting something, and oopsie daisy, you stumble across something that you know for a fact is not allowed. This can be games, maybe they are storing games, maybe they've installed games on their machine, and this is absolutely not allowed by the company's policy. Maybe they've got illegal or unlicensed software or games of some kind. Maybe it is other material, those naughty adult sites. Maybe it's that kind of material. Can't say the name here. I don't want the YouTube police on my case. But you get the idea. You can use your imagination. So whatever the situation is, how do we deal with those situations? So if you are sitting at a user's machine because they've asked you very nicely to come and troubleshoot it, maybe they've logged a ticket, and now while you're troubleshooting this user's machine, you stumble across a couple of softwares which you suspect is illegal. You see it is not licensed. It looks like it's possibly been, tampered with. Let me put it that way. I'm not going to use those words. And yeah, what do you do in those situations? So remember, the user is innocent until proven guilty. And even if you know they're guilty, you're going to pretend as if they're innocent in the beginning. At least that's the way CompTIA wants you to go and do it. So if you stumble across this material, the correct way to approach this problem would be to say, ma'am, sir, I see you've got the following program installed on your machine. It appears to be unlicensed. You know why it's unlicensed, but you just say, it appears to be unlicensed. Would you like me to help you license this software? Would you like to purchase a license for the software? Can I provide you with a website or someone that can sell you this license? You basically try and make it seem as if you are there to assist them. Hey, oopsie, I've stumbled across this software. It looks like it's not licensed. Let me help you to get this software licensed. So you know why it's unlicensed. We know why it's unlicensed. There's a very good reason for that, but we're going to pretend like we don't see it, kind of like a blind eye. And you are now going to attempt to try and help this user. And they're probably, if they really are up to no good, they're probably gonna say, no, it's fine. I'll sort it out myself. Don't worry. I'll get on it. And we know they're not gonna get onto it, but at least you've done your part. Now there is going to be situations where you might have to take it further, depending on the company, depending on whether you work there full time or whether this is a client of yours. So this is a client of yours. That's probably where it's gonna stop. But if you are working for this company full time, you might be required to take further action here. So you might have to go and, what's the word I can go and use? You might have to inform the superiors that, hey, this guy, his name is Fred. Fred has got illegal software on his machine. And then it's probably going to be some sort of disciplinary action or this or that. So yeah, I would say go and check that company's protocol. And it's also going to depend, obviously, whether you actually work for this company full time or whether you're a contract, technician of some kind. That'll dictate what you're going to be doing in those situations. I can pretty much guarantee you are going to get questions about this in the exam, guys. There's quite a few questions in the exam where they want to say, what would you do in this situation? Or what would you do in that situation? It's kind of like a driver's test. In a lot of countries, the driver's test has got questions like that where they'll give you a scenario. Here's the situation. What would you do? A, B, C, or D? Here's another scenario. What would you do? A, B, C, and D. And you are going to get a couple of those in the exams. I can guarantee it. It's going to be more in the second exam. So that will be your core 2 exam, the 1102 exam. But technically you can get in both exams, but it's going to be more the second exam if you're going to go write that one in a second, where they'll ask you, what would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? And when there is prohibited content on the user's machine, you're not just going to go and split on the guy. No, unless obviously your company protocol dictates it. You are going to go and pretend as if they're innocent, and you're going to try and hook them up with the relevant parties to get it licensed. That actually is the answer in the exam, believe it or not. It's weird. I know. It's not what I would do in real life, but it is what they want you to go and say. Then we've got software licensing. I think we've covered that. License compliance monitoring. So whether it be your company, whether it be your client's company, you'll find there's quite a few cool softwares out there, most of which are Microsoft for the most part, which you can actually go and use to see whether people's devices as a whole is licensed. So that would be something like their operating system, possibly Windows. You can go and see whether their software has been licensed. And if they are, let's say in the green and they do have licenses and all that stuff, Have any of these licenses possibly expired? Some people do have licenses, but the licenses are about to expire or they have expired. Sometimes the users are aware of this, sometimes they're not. I've found in most cases they're not aware that the license has expired, and that's normally where you're going to have to step in and assist these folks, of course. Moving on, incident response. First thing we're going to mention here is security incident types. Now, I think some of you guys might be confused as to what an incident actually is. Incident in quotes. An incident is usually an event that took place in your environment, at your client's environment or your environment. It's usually something bad that has happened. Not necessarily, it's just usually. So this could be a server that has crashed. It can be a hard drive that has crashed. It could be a server that's caught fire. It can be that someone got hacked or something that got hacked. It could be a virus. It can be a ransomware attack. It can be that the building's on fire. It can be a medical incident. Maybe someone was choking on a cookie. Yes, really, that's actually an incident. Maybe there was someone's PC that was on fire. Maybe someone stole a RAM chip out of a computer case. Maybe someone stole the whole computer case. Maybe someone stole a laptop. Maybe someone stole information from the company, digitally speaking wise. All of these classify as incidents. Now, out of the ones I just mentioned there in my ramble, what would you say classifies as security incidents? So maybe someone gained access into the server room and they were not allowed in there. Maybe they were tailgating. So it was a friend of one of the technicians. He took him in there to show him, hey, look at this. This is how the service looks. It looks pretty cool. Meanwhile, the second person, the guest, so to speak, was not allowed to be in there. That classifies as a security incident. Maybe information was stolen. There was a hard drive that has failed from the servers. It was taken out because it was supposedly failed. Someone took this failed hard drive and went and did data recovery on it. And voila, now we've got a security incident, a security breach. It could be that someone broke in somewhere, digitally speaking, ethical hacking, unethical hacking, and now they've gotten their hands on some information. So all of these are examples of incidents or security incidents, should I say. And then of course you get those other incident types which I accidentally mentioned, like medical. Maybe, someone in the server room or someone in your IT staff has, had some sort of medical incident. This could be epilepsy, seizure, choking on a cookie. I mean, you can use your imagination. It can be anything. Anything medical you can think of classifies as an incident. What do we do in these incidents when it's medical, security, IT, whatever? There needs to be a plan of action in place, guys. That's the idea here. So should there be a medical incident, you'll find that most big buildings of lots of staff members have first aid kits. Sometimes on these first aid kits, on them or near them, you'll find there's numbers, emergency numbers to call. These will be paramedics, the hospital, ambulances, and there will also be people sometimes within the building. These are people that are trained, with medical. I wouldn't say they are medics, but they are trained in the basics of medical until the medics can get there. The same applies to a fire incident. There are people, staff members, which are not full-fledged firefighters, but they might be trained in the basics of how to use a fire extinguisher and that kind of stuff until the first responders actually get there. Same applies to security and all that. So what incident response plans do you and your company have in place? So if there's a security incident, let's say there was a data leakage, digitally speaking, what's the plan of action here, boys and girls? What are you going to do about that? What is the chain? Alright, so since we are talking about, taking stuff that does not belong to us, that brings us to data integrity and preservation. Nature of digital forensic evidence. So there's going to be times, guys, when you are going to be in charge of gathering evidence at a scene, a crime scene, believe it or not. This can be a physical crime scene. This can be a digital crime scene. So you might be the person tasked with gathering this information or protecting the information or investigating the information. You never know. This can be you guys one day. So documentation of incident and recovery of data. So there's going to be times you're going to stumble across an incident that took place. This could be a physical incident. So maybe someone stole a laptop, a desktop, they stole a hard drive, they did something in that regard. You stumble across this or someone has stumbled across this. What is the plan of action? How do we document the scene? How do we gather evidence? There's going to be times where you're going to stumble across something digitally or someone else in your team stumbled across something digitally. They saw this in the logs, they saw this in analytics, something along the line. Maybe they had some sort of cool monitoring tool, and now you need to go and document the scene, digitally speaking. You need to go and gather evidence, digitally speaking. So it can be both physical and digital. I think I've made that clear by now. So first of all, identify the scope. So how far does this stretch? Who, what, and where has been affected by this incident, whatever it might be. Record the scene, whether it be digital or physical, and isolate hosts and devices. So any host or device that might have been involved in some sort of manner, isolate them, plug them out, disconnect them from the network, turn them off, make sure they cannot be tampered with. Use live forensic tools or video to extract data from systems that are still powered on. Use write blocking imaging tools to make copies of fixed and removable disks. So if there's any fixed hard drives or removable disks that was involved, that was plugged in or anything like that, you're going to want to make copies of them, but you are going to go and do that using a blocking imaging tool. So it's making an image of these things, but it is in such a manner so that someone cannot go and tamper with the image. Hence the name blocking imaging. Then you also want to go and use hashing to validate the integrity of images. So once you've made these images, I suppose you can think of it as putting a signature on them, a stamp if you will. And once upon a time, if you or someone needs to go and investigate these images further, you're first going to go and check that the hash is intact. If you see your signature in quotes is missing, then you know someone has tampered with these images. That's the point of hashing, is to make sure that the images don't get tampered with. And then lastly, guys, bag and tag physical drives and devices. Anything that's physically lying around that was involved here, you want to bag it, you want to tag it, label it properly. It doesn't help you go and put it in a bag and you don't go and label it properly. This is going to become very important later when we discuss things like chain of custody. So chain of custody, guys, is not just applicable to IT. It comes down to an incident that took place, especially a crime incident of some kind. So whether it be physical or digital, there's specific people that needs to document a scene. There's specific people that needs to gather evidence. There's specific people that needs to transport or transfer the evidence. There's specific people that needs to investigate the evidence, and specific people that needs to present the evidence in a court of law. So if any one of these people are not who they're supposed to be, the chain of custody has been broken. Even if they had no ill intent here. So if the wrong person from your company or your team gathered the evidence, even though they had no ill intent here, chain of custody has been broken. Let's say physical evidence was gathered at the crime scene, but the wrong person bagged and tagged it, or the wrong person transported it to the police office, or whatever the case might be. So they had no ill intent here, but the chain of custody has been broken. As soon as the chain of custody has been broken, the evidence is not admissible in a court of law. It's not allowed to be used in a court case. I mean, this can be anything. This can literally be the actual item, the main item involved in a crime scene. And you can see it there. It's right in front of your eyes. But if it was not transported or handled in the right manner, it cannot be used in a court of law. It is what it is, guys. It's very annoying, but it's very, very, very important for the chain of custody to be adhered to at all times. So make sure of what the chain of custody is. Alright, folks, then we are moving on to data destruction methods and disposal or recycling. So this can be anything. It can be digital, it can be physical. So I'm going to give you guys quite a few examples here, but we're going to be focusing mainly on hard drives today. So if you look at something like documents in an office, coming at this from an IT perspective, you'll find that some companies have these shredding machines that, basically shred people's documents and all that. That's to prevent what we call dumpster diving. That's also a question in the exam, by the way. Not the topic here at the moment, but that actually is something that they ask about in the exam. So it's to prevent people from going through other people's trash in the hopes of getting something sensitive, like a username, a password, credit card numbers, anything of value really. So a lot of companies, depending on the nature of the business or depending on that specific person's position in that company, they will have like shredding machines to destroy this data. Now hard drives, guys, same story. So when we get rid of hard drives, and yes, we do get rid of hard drives, we destroy these hard drives, especially server hard drives. Client computers as well, those hard drives as well, depending on the nature of your business, and maybe the nature of someone's position, those hard drives might potentially also get destroyed. but this is especially and mostly applicable to server environments. I'm sure most of you guys know that servers have lots of hard drives, especially if you look at something like a RAID array, where we back up our data. And eventually, at some point in time, you're going to find that these hard drives and these RAID arrays start failing. Nothing lasts forever. And generally, when one of these drives start to fail, the light will turn red. There's normally a light that turns red. It's supposed to be green in most cases. And you'll often hear a beeping sound of some kind. So it's going to turn red. It's going to beep, beep, beep. That means the hard drive has failed. It does not mean the data is gone, because obviously there's backups, there's clones. That's the whole point of RAID. The idea here now, guys, is for that failed hard drive to be taken out and to be replaced with a new fresh one, and it's going to start replicating itself. Now that in itself sounds pretty simple. Now, where does the data destruction come into play here? Well, that failed hard drive, which is now broken, so to speak, believe it or not, you cannot throw that in the trash. I used to do this for many companies, including my government. So when I get there, I was the guy that had to come and replace the hard drives. It's not rocket science. I mean, a child can do it. It really is that simple and easy. And often these clients of mine, including the government, they had technicians there that knew exactly what they're doing. They could do it, but they were not allowed to go and do it. So once they eventually see a drive has failed, they would call me, because they had an SLA agreement with my company. I would then go out the same day, as soon as possible, to that institution, and I would go and take out the failed hard drive, put in a new clean one, and I will take the failed hard drive with me to have it destroyed. Now, why do we have it destroyed? Because anything can be recovered, guys. If you format a hard drive or you delete something permanently on a hard drive, it can be recovered. It's not gone. If you have a hard drive that's been broken, or that has now failed, or that has crashed, it can be recovered. It's all a matter of how much money are you willing to throw at the problem. But it can be done, because I used to do that. I used to do data recovery for many companies, digitally and physically. And in all those cases, it's normally a very expensive thing. It's normally a very time-consuming thing. But it can be done. And because it can be done, that's why we destroy these drives. Now, that failed hard drive for that company that I just took out of the server, that hard drive might be worth, let's say, 20K physically. The hard drive itself, not the data, just the hard drive. I'm just making up a number here. I'm sucking out of my thumb. Let's say a brand new hard drive is worth 20K. If you go look at the hard drive I just took out. So it's easier and cheaper for the company just to take out the failed hard drive, put in another 20K one. Now, if they have to go and fix that failed hard drive, it's going to cost them way more than 20K. And even if they do get it to be fixed, it's not going to last as long, because it's second-hand now. It's got a lot of cycles on it. It's got a lot of wear and tear on it. So why not just put in a fresh one, and it's going to last a long time again. So it's cheaper, it's more efficient, it's more reliable. Now, why do we destroy the old hard drive? Because the opposition, the enemy, your competition, or rogue employees, they might be willing to go and spend a lot of money to get that data off. Yes, a new hard drive is only 20K, but to recover that hard drive might be 100K. They might be willing to throw 100K at that hard drive, because the information on it might be worth millions. So in that situation, your opposition, if they can get their slimy hands on that hard drive, they would be willing to throw 100K at that hard drive to get it fixed, to get the information off it, which might be worth millions in some cases. Now, with regards to actually destroying these hard drives, you might say, hey, I can do that. You can. But the majority of big companies, they do, what happens there? They audit them. These companies get audited. So some external person is going to come in, they're going to evaluate your backups, your security, this and that, and they're going to go and check your logs, and they're going to see, we see here, you guys mentioned there was a hard drive that was replaced last month. Where is this hard drive? They're going to ask. The failed hard drive. And you're going to say, it's been destroyed. They're going to say, okay, cool. That sounds great, but where is the proof of this? How do we know you actually destroyed this hard drive like you said you did? Now, obviously these people might really have destroyed this hard drive, but there's no proof of that. How do we know you did do what you said you did? So for that reason, what you'll find, what a lot of companies does, big companies, they will get a third-party company like myself, that used to be me. I would come out, or the company would come out, they'll collect these drives, they will write down the serial numbers of these drives, have them destroyed, and issue this company with a certificate. And the next time round, when these people come and say, hey, where's the proof? You provide them with the certificate and they're going to get off your case. So yeah. Now, as for destroying the drives, how do we do that? And guys, this part is very important for the exam. Watch out. You are going to get this as a potential question exam. I don't know if everybody's going to get it, but it is in the pool of questions. And should you be one of the unfortunate souls that gets the question, at least you'll know what the answers is. So the ways we do that, special destruction machinery, is to shred the drives. So you go and take the hard drive. This is those special companies that does this. They throw it in the machine, it shreds the drive, and it rips it to bits and pieces. It's kind of like ripping a piece of paper to pieces, except it actually rips the hard drive to pieces. Pretty cool, right? We incinerate the drive. That's another way of doing it. In other words, we get it melted down to like molten metal. That's also a valid option. And the third one mentioned by CompTIA, and I really don't agree with this one, but it is in the course, is to deguzz the hard drive. Deguzzing the hard drive, guys, for those of you that don't know, it's kind of like when you take a magnet and you bring the magnet near the hard drive. Now, for all of those of you that's aware, hard drives don't like magnets. If you bring a magnet near a hard drive, especially the old mechanical ones, it corrupts the hard drive. But it's never 100% effective. So there's always a chance that one or two small documents might not have gotten corrupted there, and they might be recoverable, and they might contain something very, very sensitive in nature. So deguzzing, in theory, yes, it is one of the three options mentioned in A+. So I'm mentioning it to you guys because it might be mentioned in the exam. But in real life, I don't want you guys using that method because it sucks. It's not very effective. Shredding, yes. Incinerating, yes. Deguzzing, Don't use it in real life. I'm only mentioning it because of the exam. Other method you can go and use is to go and drill a hole physically through the hard drive. So if you want to do it yourself, you can drill a hole physically through the hard drive. You can go and hammer the hard drive, although hammering might also not be the best option. But drilling it might be a good option. So yeah, I've seen drilling is actually an extra option they've added to the new A+ exam. The old A+ exam, The old A+ exam, that will be the 1000 series. They said shredding, incinerating, and deguzzing. That was the only three answers in the exam. You had to go and choose them from a list of about 6 or 8 possible choices. And that would be it. Now in this new version, the 1100 series of A+, they've actually even added drilling as a possible option to go and choose. And drilling is a valid way of doing it. But you've got no proof that it was actually done there unless the company did it for you. Well, boys, girls, that is the end of the second last module of A+. That is the end of module 19. I hope you guys have enjoyed this module. I hope you guys have learned something. Please let me know in the comment section down below if you've actually learned something and what you learned. What did you not know? What did you know? If you did enjoy the video, please give the video a like. It does help me a lot. It helps other people out too when you do that. If you'd like to know when the last module, being module 20, comes out, or those practice questions, anything else, consider subscribing, otherwise you might miss it. Well, boys and girls, this is where I say special thank you to all of the sponsors of this channel, and if you would like to do that too, you can find that information in the video description down below. Thank you to the Patreon guys. Thank you to the PayPal guys. There's a list of all the Patreon sponsors of the channel. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. There's a list of all the PayPal sponsors. And also thank you to those that clicked on the thanks button below the video or that just bought me a milkshake or a coffee. You can find that information down below. And then lastly, guys, just a reminder, there is a Discord server for those of you who would like to join. It's in the video description. It's literally like way at the bottom of the video description. It's called Free IT Training. It's an IT community of like-minded people. I'm also in that server. You can ask people questions there about A+, any other course. And maybe you can help someone else in that server. It's just a fun community. Alright guys, we'll talk in the next module of A+, module 20. See you next time.